All right, so when you have successfully named your first application using camel casing, you're going to get a blank palette. Okay, so let us turn back to Canvas. Now, number 5 says, click on OK to accept the project name in which we have done. All right. Now, under that, it states the project is created. The project is created and opens the following page. Okay. So let us take the time to read under the image. It states, this view is referred to the designer. Okay, so what you see right here is the designer. It is the view where you lay out what your app will look like. Take a look at the palette on the left. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the palette on the left. Let me bring up, there we go. Okay, so the palette, which is on your left-hand side, has drawers, okay? So the first drawer is called the user interface drawer, okay? In this drawer, there are a plethora of components, all right? So the first component is a button. The next is a checkbox. You have an image, you have a label, you have a password text box, you have a text box, you have all of these components in the user interface drawer, okay? Now, when you open your app, you see, when you open any app you use, you always see buttons, labels, text boxes, etc. Okay, so this is where you can program, pull out those type of components under your user interface drawer. Okay, and now click on your layout drawer. Okay, you'll see your components in there, which organizes the arrangement of how your components will be arranged on your app. Okay, so you have look at all of these drawers. You have media, where you can put a camcorder or a camera or sound. You could what I like is look at the maps. You have maps where you could program your own GPS system on your app. You have I like social, so any company like Twitter or Facebook or TikTok that has any social media site, they very heavily use this drawer and use these components within this drawer. So if your social media app use a communication device called texting, this is where they get it. Sharing, email, phone calls, etc. Okay, so that is our palette. All right, so let's go ahead and tab back over to Canvas. So let's go ahead and just read the different facets of our designer window. And we just went over our palette. Our palette, you find the components and drag them to the viewer to add them to your app. Okay. So if I want a button, I would simply just click, hold, and drag the button over to my viewer. Now my viewer simply displays how my app is going to look. And it states, drag components from the palette to the viewer to design what your app will look like. Okay? And to the right of your viewer, you will see your components. Now your components show your components facet of your designer window. It shows the components you have added to your app in a hierarchical structure. Okay, we'll get to that later. You'll understand wholeheartedly what that means. Okay, to the right of components, you'll see properties. All right, select a component in the components list to edit its properties, name, color, size in this pane. So in your properties pane, if I had a button, you can change the color of the button. You can change the information that is on the button. You can change the size of the button. You can pretty much customize that button any way you would like, okay? And lastly, you have your designer button. I like the designer button because this is where you go from your design view, and when you click on the blocks button, that's where you actually program your app to behave the way you want it to behave, all right? So when we were doing our Blockly games, that's exactly how you would code it, but it's a little bit more in depth, so we're going to get to that later, okay? So at this time, I just want you to read this paragraph, and I'm just going to quickly skim through it, and then we're going to do a reflect and discuss, okay? So take a look at the palette on the left. It contains multiple drawers. We went over that. Each drawer has components that you can drag to the viewer, the part of the page where you can preview your app. The first viewer is the user interface viewer, okay? So we covered that. All right, so here's what we're going to discuss. There are two questions. What are other components do you see in the user interface drawer? All right, see the picture. Okay, the next question that I want you to answer in a complete sentence. Click the question mark icon to the right of the component name. What do you see? Okay, so at this time, I want you to go and click on the discussion image. And when you click on the discussion image, basically, it states what we just read. All right? And to complete this discussion assignment, you're going to click on the reply button, the reply link. And when you do that, it's going to take you to the text environment where you can answer both of those questions in a complete sentence. When you have finished that, click on post reply. And once you have clicked on post reply, I want you to click back and go back to where we left off. Okay, go. Okay. At this time, you should pause this part of the video and complete that portion of your lesson. Okay, so now we're at number 6. Number 6 states, click on the other drawers in the palette to see what other components are available in App Inventor. All right, so at this time, discussion number 2, you're going to click on the discussion image. And I want you to answer this question in a complete sentence. Be thoughtful, okay? Don't rush and do this, okay? So be thoughtful, think, and share ideas. And when you are finished, go ahead and click on the back button and go back, pick up where you left off, okay? Number 7 gets to the fun stuff, okay? Now, we are going to drag our first component to our app, okay? So number 7 states, drag the text box component and drop it into the viewer, all right? See my example, okay? And what I'm gonna do what my example is showing you what to do. I'm gonna go to my MIT App Inventor. I'm gonna go to my user interface, and I am going to find the text box. I'm gonna drag it to my viewer, okay? Just like so. Very good. If you have done that, you have programmed your first text box. Give yourself a round of applause. Okay. Now we at number 8. Number 8 states, drag the button component and drag it to the viewer just below the text box. All right, take a look at my example. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tab over to my MIT app Inventor and drag that button from my user interface to my viewer. I'm going to drop it right there. And if you've gotten that far, I'm very proud of you. Now notice when a component is dragged from the palette into the viewer, look at the component portion of your design. You see how when it's adding the button, the button is being added to your component? Okay. Take a look at the components pane to the right of your viewer. Okay. So we have a couple more questions. Number 8. All right, let's reflect and discuss. So let's go ahead and click on the discussion image. Number 3, components pane. All right, so it states, thus far we have dragged both the text box and the button's components to the viewer. Number 1. Now take a look at the components pane to the right of the viewer. Click reply and answer the following questions in complete sentences. You have 3 questions. Question number 1. What do you think the list of components pane represents? Can you guess what screen 1 stands for? Okay. See screen 1 right here? Can you guess what that stands for? And question number 3. What do these properties do? Okay, so you see the properties right here. Okay, so each component has many different properties. Okay, so what do the properties do? Okay, so I want you to think. You can converse with one another to share helpful ideas. And you're going to click on reply and share your thoughts in complete sentences. Always use correct punctuation, okay? And you can pause this part of the video to complete this portion of your assignment, okay? And once you do that, click on the back button and pick up where you left off. Okay, number 9. Number 9 states, change some of the properties of the button 1 component. All right, you're going to answer these 3 questions in complete sentences. What happens when you change the font size property? What are the possible values for height and width? Try out different values and observe what happens to the size of the button. What is the difference between background color and text color? Go ahead and click on the discussion image and reflect and discuss and answer those 3 questions in complete sentences. Make sure you click on the reply button, answer those questions, and then click on the post reply button. And when you finish, hit the back button, pick up where you left off. Okay. So we're going to stop there. So the crux of this is not for you to just do steps 1 through 9. Okay. The crux of this lesson is for you to play around with it, to tinker with it, to learn about each component. Let me go back to my MIT app. So you have two components that's in your viewer, and each component has a list of properties. What I want you to do is take the time to play around with the different properties of the text box component. Look at the default color, right? Change it. Let's see what happens. All right. Observe. You know, what do it means when you enable it and disable it? Take a look at the font bold checkbox, the font italics, the font size. Play around with it. Look at all of this. Do the same thing with the button, okay? And then when you play around with it, answer the reflection questions, okay? Man, don't just stop there. You can add a label, right? You can add a password text box. Play around with this stuff. Go out to the layout drawer or to the social drawer, right? Go to the texting, right? Play around with this. Now, if I want to get rid of some of these components, you can just highlight it and delete it. All right? You can go to your components portion of your designer, and you can highlight it and delete it. But your job is to play around with it and get to know this, because as we move on to other lessons, it's going to get progressively much more difficult. Okay? So learn as much as you can with steps 1 through 9. Converse with one another, reflect, and come back much more knowledgeable than where you are today. Okay? Hope you had fun. And if you have any questions, go ahead and message me via Canvas, and I will answer your questions as soon as I receive your questions. Okay? God bless and have fun. Peace.